as a child of payroll's embrace, but now I see its power, its impact, its place. From taxes to pensions, compliance to pay, we fuel every workforce day after day. From Sydney to Seoul, from London to Rome, we pay the wages that build dreams and homes. It's data, it's tech, it's strategy too. It's complex, it's vital, it's built for you. We cut through the jargon, no room for mistake, keeping businesses thriving, compliant and safe. Forecasting strategy, it's all on our mind. It's time payroll took its place in the boardroom to shine.
They think there's a button, how little they know the global complexities behind every payroll. We drive the economy, powering trade. Without us in place, no one gets paid.
Payroll analytics beyond the sum, tech-driven systems, the future has come. But it's people, not machines, who bring payroll its soul. That's why it's time to stand up and let our voices unfold. We cut through the jargon, no room for mistake, keeping businesses thriving, compliant and safe. Forecasting strategy, it's all on our mind. It's time payroll took its place in the boardroom to shine.
Double three and IRS 94 ones in the US, UK, PBICS, salary sacrifice, and FPS, BIR in Manila, withholdings no joke, single touch in Australia, so no one goes broke. C&D in China, DSN in France, global payroll's a delicate dance. From taxes to pensions, with zero delay, we make sure the world gets its well-earned pay.
So here's to the pros who work through the night, ensuring each paycheck is perfectly right. Payroll's a calling, a passion, a pride, a global community, we stand side by side. We cut through the jargon, no room for mistake, keeping businesses thriving, compliant and safe. Forecasting strategy, it's all on our mind. It's time payroll took its place in the boardroom to shine. Payroll's the future, it's time to be bold. It's time to stand up and let our voices unfold. We cut through the jargon, no room for mistake, keeping businesses thriving, compliant and safe. Forecasting strategy, it's all on our mind. It's time payroll took its place in the boardroom to shine.
Hello all, excited to be here for the USA's version of the Global Payroll Fest 2025. 24 countries, 24 experts, 24 hours. Some would think that we're crazy. I'm Tom, a co-founder of JGA Inc. So that's our US business, and I'm delighted to host our US session. We actually launched in the US in 2023. So this is probably, not being biased, but the most exciting session for me of our 24-hour journey around the global payroll world. No secret, as we know, the United States has one of the most decentralized, compliance-driven payroll environments. Over 11,000 tax jurisdictions, differing state and local labor laws, complex benefit reporting. Managing payroll in the US can be a serious challenge for global organizations. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Chasney. Sarah is Director of Global Payroll, Travel and Expense at Banfield Pet Hospital. Sarah is also co-chair of Payroll Org's Shared Services Committee. She's won several awards for payroll best practice, payroll management and innovation. She's even appeared on our podcast alongside Nick Day, discussing how to lead payroll with creativity. So who better to join compliance technology and workforce engagement in the US? Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today. Could you share a little bit more about your background and your experience with US payroll?
Yes, thanks for having me, Tom. It's nice to be here and be a part of Global Pay Fest. 24 hours. It's a ambitious venture you guys are doing.
We'll see how we
Yeah,
get
so
on. Plenty of this.
right. Yes. Cheers. So I'm Sarah Chasney, CPP. I'm a certified payroll professional here in the United States. I currently, as Tom said, work at Banfield Pet Hospital. We are part of the Mars family, so Mars Veterinary Health. We have over 1,000 locations across the United States, where I believe we're operating in about 46 states. And we have about 22,000 associates on our payroll on any given day, with a good chunk of W-2s that we issue every year as well. I've been doing payroll for about 20 years now. I don't want to age myself, but it's been about that long.
It doesn't look it. It doesn't look
Thank
it.
you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. But I've been doing payroll for 20 years now, and I've been super active in the payroll org for the last bunch of years, just trying to network and volunteer in a ton of different committees and learn about what's out there and what I can learn from others. So that's been an amazing opportunity. And I've met some amazing people like you and Nick, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I love payroll. Been doing restaurants for years and just recently had moved over to veterinary health. So
Amazing.
A little bit different exposure.
And co-chair on one of those committees now as well.
Yeah, I believe I'm on 6 or 7 different committees in total. I definitely have a hard time saying no to volunteering.
We'll bow down.
I'm blessed. I'm honestly lucky to be part of them. The committees are amazing, and every opportunity we have to get together and network and just learn from each other is really a great opportunity to expose and enhance our understanding of payroll. So I do appreciate the committees. Yeah.
100%. Thank you, Sarah. It's going to be tricky, I think you'll agree, to fit all of the complexities of American payroll into 1 hour, but we're going to give it a good go today. Today, we're going to have a look at the complex structure of US payroll, recent developments, compliance risks, and tips for success. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A at the end. We've had some questions lined up from our network for you. So without further ado, let's jump into your expert overview, please.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I mean, I think to this day, after doing payroll in the US for 20 years, I still don't feel like an expert because, as you mentioned, it is an extremely complex operation, I guess you could say. Yeah. Sheer size in general, I think, is the first thing to note. You know, we're huge. You could fit the UK into the US 40 times. Our states are large and in charge, is what we say over here. They definitely rule the land, and we have a lot of them. So it makes it difficult to handle compliance and regulations when every state differs. So another thing, before I even go into the state part of it all, tips. You know, I know that tips are not huge in other countries and in other parts of the world, but they are certainly big here. And so in my prior world, working in restaurants, learning about tips and tip credits and how that works and the reporting around it is unique and interesting for the US. I bet. But going back into the tax side, so we have a locality-based taxation system. And what that means is you're going to have, and I'm going to read from some of my notes too, so I don't sound like I'm just making this up. But individual cities and counties in certain states that are going to impose their own payroll taxes and their own reporting requirements, in addition to what you have to do for federal and state. So not only are you abiding by the federal laws, but you're abiding by the state laws, perhaps the local laws. You're doing all sorts of different types of taxes, from local taxes, state income tax, you know, mandated federal taxes. You've got sometimes even school district tax, which is unique. If you have employees in a state, Pennsylvania, one of our states here, it's an extremely complex payroll because you've got locals where you've got people in different zip codes who have to have different taxes applied. So you may have someone who lives in one neighborhood and maybe borders on another neighborhood, and they could have 2 different sets of taxes because of that, in addition to their state taxes or their federal taxes. So it's an extremely complex ecosystem.
Sorry, I'm just thinking. So how do you even keep up with all of that? Is it like having your processes, your procedures and stuff in place, or is there a lot more to it than that?
Not easily. I think a lot of it depends on what systems you utilize and what tools you're utilizing. For example, currently I use Workday. So a lot of the state laws are delivered, and we're fortunate that Workday has a product that delivers these updates to the system organically for all clients. So there's a benefit to that, I would definitely say. Outside of that, you're still monitoring and you're having to stay on top of all the different states and what their different laws are. Just recently, we had another state, and I'm sure we'll talk about this as we talk further, but we had another state that had a new paid family leave program. And that just popped up, and we keep on seeing that popping up in different states. I think there's like 16 or so, 13 or so that have different paid family leave programs now.
Wow.
And that's in addition to many other additional programs that they each have. So it's not easily. I know for my team currently, we have I have a payroll tax manager. I have a specialist who specializes currently in compliance and reporting. They're looking for these changes, making sure that we're compliant, making sure that things are working as they should in the system.
Nice.
It's not easy. Definitely not easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not,
I think
not easy, we'd all do it, right?
yeah, and you don't know that you're doing it right. And I think there's millions of different scenarios that can arise. And as you said earlier in your intro, we have 11,000 tax jurisdictions. On top of that, you have at least 25,000 tax changes a year. Whether it's this state's changing their rate, you've got unemployment rates and experience rates, and you've got all these different taxes that just change throughout the year at different points of the year for different states. So yeah, it's definitely complicated to keep up with.
Insane. I bet it is.
It is, yeah. And I think with the states and what's unique about the United States here is some of our states have agreements. These are called reciprocal agreements, which are essentially like a treaty that's signed between the different states, where if you have a worker who works in one state but lives in another, you can avoid double taxation. Not all states have that. And so if you're a company like mine that operates in over 1,000 locations in 46 states, maybe there are locations that border on different states. And, maybe you've got a lot of people who live and work in different states, and just trying to understand, is this a combination of states that has reciprocity? Is this something where I need to tax both resident and work taxes for this associate in two different places? And they're going to have to handle it filing at the end of the year. So it definitely creates some uniqueness. And as I mentioned earlier, states always supersede. So in the US, you're going to need to pay attention to the laws at the state level and the local levels. So like federal law provides your overarching guidelines, and you have to abide by the federal law, but at the end of the day, your states will supersede. So minimum wage or taxes, you've got all these different things that are going to vary amongst states. And if it's a greater or more beneficial for the associate or for the employee, you're going to go with the state's law. So it really does make it complicated to figure out what do I do here? What am I following?
It sounds like you've got an amazing setup there. So you've got your supplier that will support you with those kind of things. You've got your team who are looking out for them. Is there a time that regulation has come out that's caught you off guard, or it's been quite a quick, we need to get this sorted?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of that's with the sick leave recently too. Just recently, New York, for example, had come out with a new, and I forget the exact terminology for it, but it was a maternity law, where you had to come up with the ability to provide hours for employees based off of certain requirements, total a number of average hours. And again, I don't remember this one specifically off the top of my head, but I remember my team having to pivot pretty quickly to figure out, how can we build this into our accrual system? How can we make it so that we build it right and that it's available immediately? Because it was very quick that this came down. So we have to build it out, but you also have people who want to start using the benefit pretty quickly. So maybe it takes 6 weeks to build out the configurations in the system so that it's taxing appropriately, it's withholding appropriately, or paying appropriately. But you've got people who want to start using that benefit. So you're really in a quick rush to not just do it right, but to make it usable. And that's not always easy in systems.
Right. So I always speak about like having your entourage around you. Like you need your guys, like you need your team, you need your lawyers, you need your advisors, you need your vendors. You have to have that all in place in case those kind of things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's super important to work cross-functionally too. So, having regular meetings with your HR or people in organization and your finance and your legal, your employment law, maybe even your total rewards or compensation people, having a meeting and getting all of these functional leaders together or all these functional specialists together to say, is there anything anyone's heard of or anything anyone's seen that's coming down the pipeline, anything that we need to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
aware of that could be something that we need to know and be on top of. So I think it's important to work cross-functionally and definitely have your soldiers, your team that's out there looking and trying to be aware of all the different comings and goings.
Amazing. I'm going to jump in and ask you a question there, if that's okay, because I know that's
Yeah.
so. So one of my guys wanted me to ask you this, and that is, has your relationship with HR or finance evolved over time?
I love this question actually. So, it's a common joke almost amongst payroll. Where do we land? Do we land in finance or in HR? I know me personally, I flip flop between both my entire career. I've been under finance, I've been under HR, and I don't think there's any wrong answer for that. What I do think is important is what you touched on is the relationship. I know for me, the relationship has massively expanded over the last couple of years. I've
Nice.
become a true partner of our P&O function, is what we call people in organization.
Mhm.
It's important. So I report up to finance currently. And while I love that structure and I think that's very important, it works great. But I still have to have that very close relationship to HR or people in an organization. There's Payroll's financial, it's transactional. We have a lot of money that comes to the door. We have a lot of taxes that we're withholding and remitting, and a lot of reporting that we're responsible for. It's important that we do it to the penny and that we do
Yeah.
it um, economically, and that's all very important. But the aspect of HR is truly a deep part of employment and a deep part of the experience. And we hear so much more about the experience these days, and HR is a very big part of that. So, but like you think about how all of the HR initiatives and all the things that expand upon the experience, what happens? They all land in the paycheck.
Yeah.
Every one of the initiatives that I can think of that are going on in my own company or my prior companies, like any initiative you can come up with, to incentivize people, it's most likely going to land in their paycheck, whether it's more
Hmm.
hours for a benefit plan or it's a new benefit program that you're withholding on their behalf, or it's new, you've got all these different initiatives, new compensation programs that you're doing. It all lands in the paycheck. And so you
Yeah.
have to have these close relationships, because if HR is wanting to implement this new incentive and they want to do it quickly, well, have they talked to payroll, and has payroll been brought in so that they can make sure the system is built and configured to be able to handle whatever initiative they're wanting to push through, to make sure it
Yeah.
can be executed at the standard that we've set. And so I think that relationship has gotten more and more important over the last few years. And, those who have embraced it have benefited from it for sure.
Speaking of relationships as well, I also think like what I've been hearing from people is that the relationship between payroll and the employee has changed quite a lot as well. People used to say to me, actually, there are employees that we pay. A lot of people have started saying to me in the last couple of years, like they're our internal customers. So like it's
Yeah.
delivering a service that way instead of, oh, it doesn't matter as much because they're internal. It's like, no, they are our customer, but they are our internal customer, and we have to get it right.
We often refer to our associates as our customers. And I know,
Nice,
here we actually say associate service instead of customer service.
nice.
We do believe in it strongly. It's one of the ways that I personally lead. I strongly believe that we are a service. We used to be a transactional service. We were here
Hmm.
to take in your direct deposit information and to process your hours and to produce this paycheck and this pay slip and answer questions if you had a problem. Now we've become this, source of information. We can help with financial wellness and understanding your paycheck and how
Yep.
your gross net taxes work, and I think that's so important. So your relationship has changed. I do believe in providing really great customer service. If you're an employee and you're out there, why are you coming to work? You're coming to work to make money. Almost certainly that's one of the top reasons you
For
have
sure.
gotten a job, right? And so we deliver on that. We deliver on literally the most fundamental promise that an organization can make to an employee, which is to pay you timely and on right, to pay you what you've
Hmm.
agreed to and to do it right and on time. So I think in order to provide that experience, we've had to understand employees more and create this better relationship between us. We're not just here for when there's a fire or a problem. I think payroll's learned to be a little bit more proactive. We've learned
Absolutely.
to find opportunities to make it so that people aren't asking questions and they're not having fires. And we're a reliable source for questions or for proactive work on financial wellness or things like that. So I think it's become a lot more important over the last few years.
I completely agree with you. And talking about being proactive and talking about the relationship between employer and employee, how do you feel about pay on demand and how that might change what's going on in the US or how it might be taken?
I've spoken about this before. I'm a believer in earned wage access or in
Mhm.
on-demand pay. I think as payroll has evolved over the last few years, it's gotten to the point where you can pay pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Whether you've got pay cards and you can load funds to a pay card pretty quickly, or you need to issue a payment pretty quickly, you can do so. You can get funds to someone quickly, same day, perhaps even. But that's only, if you're processing your payroll or if they're terming and you have to pay them in advance of the on cycle payroll. So I think earned wage access and on demand, it offers this opportunity for people to be able to manage their money in a way that they haven't before.
Mhm.
I am a believer in the product. I think it's a benefit for those who need it. I think it's often misunderstood by people and maybe thought to be as something that people take advantage of.
Yeah.
Um, I think the programs that you pick are important, making sure there's opportunities and absolutely making sure people can take out their money for free. So having a lot of these vendors have like a same day where you're paying a fee and a next day where it's for free. So really just educating your employees on the financial wellness aspect and that they have this free option available.
Mhm.
I think it's a great thing for employers to be able to offer as long as they're explaining it correctly and making sure people are using providing the information so that people can use it as best as possible. We are
Yeah.
not in control of how people use their money. I, I can run a payroll and our payday will be Friday. And I can't tell you to go to an in-network ATM or an out-of-network ATM. I can't, that's not
Yeah.
my job. That's your decision to make with your money. So I
So
do think it's a good benefit.
I think one of the concerns that people have is about safeguarding, right, as well. But exactly as you just mentioned, really that would be there anyway. Like if you get paid bi-weekly or if you get paid at the end of the month, like you do in the UK, your employer isn't, coming and having a conversation with you after 3 days and saying, "Have you spent all of your money yet?" It's like, well, it's none of your business, you know. So it's like I think one of the things that people worry about is the safeguarding element, and are people going to get into difficulty? But people do that anyway. Um,
Absolutely, they do. Absolutely. And sorry, I muted because perfect timing. I have landscapers, and the neighbors' landscapers are next door. So I apologize if
invite
you hear any
invite them on,
background.
see what they think about US payroll.
Right? I should ask them. I wonder if their paychecks are right.
Exactly, exactly. So we're going to move on to a bit of a case study walkthrough, and I
Okay.
think what we were going to talk about was COVID, because it's like just past 5 year anniversary, half a decade since that kicked off. How
Yeah.
crazy is that? What we wanted to talk about, just get a little bit of an overview as to the business that you were at the time and what you know from your network about how other businesses within Payroll Org might have reacted. Just like
Yeah.
an overview of how COVID affected everything in US payroll.
I think it's so funny. So I was thinking about this last night and thinking about COVID and the time. And I do have to, try and rack my brain a bit for what happened back then, because it was five
Oh,
years ago. It
yeah,
feels like it was just yesterday in one hand, but then it feels like it was forever ago at the same time.
yeah.
COVID was a really great example of why US payroll kind of sucks. No, why it's why it's very challenging. With COVID, we had all of these different, programs that got implemented or put out, communicated in a very fast way. All of us were going through the same thing that everyone else was going through. We were all having to work remote all of a sudden, not working within distances of each other, having to figure out how to print checks from your home, perhaps.
Yeah.
So, you had all these problems, but then you also had these ridiculous programs that came through. So you had like I think it was the Family First, or FFCRA, it was what it was called, the Family First Corona Response Act, I think it was.
Yeah.
So that was a requirement to pay family and sick leave for COVID-related reasons. You had the CARES Act. So the CARES Act, which was part of the Paycheck Protection Program on that one, and then the employee retention credits. So for that one, the CARES, I remember it was just a few weeks, maybe a week or two after we were quarantined. So like March 21st, around that time frame. And my payroll team, we had deemed ourselves essential. So we stayed as long as possible in the office, and then we were kicked out and eventually, fully remote. But when we were doing this, it was like 2 weeks had gone by, and all of a sudden my senior leaders were reaching out, trying to figure out how payroll could support in all of the reporting requirements. So there were all these credits and programs that were available that were going to support and help companies as well as employees. But it was a first come, first serve. This credit's not going to be, or this program's not going to be available to everybody. These incentives aren't going to be available to everybody. So get your stuff in, get it in quick, and you'll benefit from it. Well, that data didn't magically appear. There was a ton of data required in a certain format in a certain way, and payroll's one of the richest sources of data in the organization.
Yeah.
So I know that us personally at my last company, we were pulled in to immediately start figuring out how to report on all this stuff and how they can submit this to get approved for these great incentives. So this all happened overnight, and we became this viral resource. And then you had all these different sick laws as well. So the different states started implementing different laws. So California was one of them. New York was another. But California, I remember, was retroactive. So they said, you need to be able to provide a certain amount of time, and it needs to be calculated based off of 6 months average hours of work. Or you could do a 1-year look back, or, you got all these different methodologies of how you could calculate and determine what benefits someone could get. And all of that had to be figured out within payroll.
It must have been a crazy, crazy time, right? So as I say, we started our US business in 23. So we've been visiting since 22. We came in 23, but 2020, like I was just UK, and we had like the furlough scheme, the job retention scheme, all of that kind of stuff, but only on our tiny little island. So we have Wales and Scotland, and they have slightly different rules. But having almost 50 countries within one with different laws for the same outbreak must have just been chaos.
Absolutely. And, maybe a little bit easier, perhaps, maybe if you're operating in just one state, or if you have just a few, maybe on one coast. But if you're like us, where you have, in both my last company and my current company, we were across the entire United States. So you're back to that drawing board of trying to figure out, how do I stay on top of all of this? How do I know what's changing and when, and what's going to actually be retroactive? That's a common thing here in the United States, where they'll implement something and say, oh, it's effective. They'll implement something in July and say it's effective January 1st, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Well, how do I figure that out? Okay.
Yeah.
That was big. And I think one of the important parts to talk about with COVID for the United States too. So, if you look back at the timing of it all, and this all kind of came into play right after COVID, it was a huge impact to taxes. So prior to COVID, we actually had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which reduced tax rates and increased the standard deduction for the United States. So this was something that Trump had pushed through during his first term. And as an example, so like when we're filing our taxes, we typically you have a credit for your children. So if you have a child, you usually could claim $1,000, and that would reduce from your deduction. They changed that with this Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and made it so that it was 2K. You could do 2,000 per child. Great, fantastic. Everyone thought that was great. And then all of a sudden, so this thing changed, and the Tax Job Act came through, and in that they also had a change to the W-4. So the W-4, which is our form that you fill out to determine what taxes you want withheld for your federal income tax, that form has not been changed since 1986.
Wow.
1986. And I believe it was 2019 is when it changed, or 2020 is when it went into effect. So 2020, right before COVID hit, that January is when the new W-4 came out. So many payroll people were freaking out because we had to figure out how to configure this new W-4, or did our systems configure it? How does it work? How do we explain it to people? It was a completely different way of filling out this form that you filled out for every single job you've ever had. It is a requirement. You have to fill it out. It's a standard part of your onboarding. And now this form that you've been filling out the same way, single, one, married, zero, however you're filling it out, has changed. You're no longer claiming dependents. You're taking that tax credit, that $1,000 or that $2,000, and you're claiming it up front. So you're saying, when I have my paycheck and I have my taxes withheld, I want to have this amount calculated in to my biweekly. So it's taking out less essentially each pay period.
Wow.
Amazing. People were super happy. They had more money in their pockets throughout the year, right? Throughout their paychecks, every paycheck had a little bit more money. It was fantastic. So they brought home more net pay. We had COVID hit, and we had all these amazing tax credits. So you had all these credits that came through. You got in stimulus payments, right? So we had these credits and stimulus payments, economic impact payments is what they were called. Those all came into play in like 2020, 2021. And then in 2022, when there were no more stimulus credits, but still these reduced tax tables, so you had less taxes being withheld each pay period, but you no longer were getting these stimulus checks or these economic impact payments. When people started filing in 2022, they started seeing massive differences in their tax and their take home, or their refund rather. Okay. So and in the payroll world, what does that mean? So I had hundreds of people calling in saying, why didn't you take any taxes from my check? Why didn't payroll take any taxes? And we would have to explain, well, we had this new W-4 that you completed, and this is how you filled it out. And if you didn't check your paycheck every pay period, you never had federal income tax being withheld. The way that the tax tables had changed prior to COVID, and then the impact of these stimulus checks coming in, made it confusing to people. They didn't realize what the impact was on their taking home more each pay period and having less taxes withheld. They still owed the same taxes. It just meant they owed it now at the end of the year, as opposed to throughout each paycheck. So it was a huge change to taxes.
Yeah. And it's like, unfortunately, payroll seems to be the bearer of bad news as well, right? It's like I'm sure you weren't getting phone calls saying thank you for paying me correctly and on time, Sarah. It's the phone calls when it goes wrong that
absolutely,
that
Yep. Yeah. And it's the very common one, right? And right now we're going through it, it's April 22nd today as we're recording this, or April 25th, whenever this airs. But it's right before or right after tax season. So here in the US, we had our taxes due on April 15th. And so we've been getting inundated with questions, and I do every year at any employer, because, people don't necessarily look at their paycheck throughout the year. They see more take home pay, or they see that they've gotten paid and they don't look at their pay slips. So I try to educate people to look at your pay slips, make sure you've got federal income tax coming out, because it does have an impact at the end of the year when you're going to file. And people do come crying to payroll. So we get tickets where people will be coming in saying, why didn't you withhold any federal income tax? Or I owe thousands of dollars. And so, I think it's taught payroll people to try and be proactive in education and reminding people, check your pay slips. We'll try to send out quarterly reminders. Check your pay slips, make sure that everything's being taxed correctly, make sure your work location shows the right work location and that you're being taxed where you work appropriately, because that's where we're paying into your unemployment and your paid family leave. And that matters if you operate in multiple different states, or perhaps if you live and work in a different state.
Wow. One thing that you mentioned in there that really caught me was like payroll, where so many payroll leaders were like, what do we do with this new information? And something that we'll come on to shortly is like the sense of community. I wonder what did you do to get with your colleagues and your friends and your payroll connections? Like, did you meet up on Zoom, or was it house party or Teams or something like that? Like, what were we doing at that time? Like, how did you speak to your network and work it out?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I have to credit Payroll org personally for a lot of that. With Payroll org, I had started getting active in the community and in the network. And as you said, it's a special network. We're very much a large family of payroll professionals, and it's become a huge part of my career and my world is my payroll network. But back then, everything immediately went remote. We had all these conferences that now went to a virtual experience, and so I do think it kind of it forced us all to communicate more online and to have more Teams meetings and calls. And I know that those committees that I volunteer in became way more popular, and people started joining more and more often because it gave you an opportunity to ask questions and to ask other people. So like here in the US, and actually I think this is global, but Workday, for example, has a great group, a Workday user group, and it's ran by someone at a company. I'm not going to name names, but someone at a company, a large company. People join this group, and monthly we all meet. It's hundreds of companies where you have someone from their company who's meeting and learning and talking, and maybe you're asking a question, or how are you handling this COVID regulation that came through, or how are you handling this new paid family leave program that came through. It's crucial to being successful, I think, in payroll, is tapping into that network. Yeah, I mean, just the other day we were talking about our W-2s, which are annual forms that we deliver at the end of the year that show what your wages have been and how you file your taxes. Where was I going with that? See, I lost my train of thought.
That's fine. Well, I was thinking, so we set up, so at the time, we were obviously only in UK and EMEA, but we set up a WhatsApp group, like beautifully simple for payroll leaders. So it's like you've got your payroll org, you've got your CIPP, those kind of governing bodies. But if you need the answer to a question in minutes, what would you do? And we were like, well, what I would do would be to contact one of my colleagues on WhatsApp. It's like, okay, let's just get that going for payroll leaders. And we did it, and we set it up. But it's almost like, your team could come to you and say, Sarah, what's going on? But where do you go in that time of so much new legislation coming out? Like, yes, you can go to your governing bodies, but if you need an answer right then, right now, jump onto WhatsApp. And that's exactly what we set up. And I know that you're now a member of our US payroll leaders WhatsApp community, which we've had going for finishing. A year.
Yeah, no, and thank you for finishing, because that helped me finish my train of thoughts. What I was saying is, with the W-2s, I have a little email group with some of the people from my different committees that I've exchanged, and I know that they use the same system as I do. So I had reached out and I sent a message to all of them. And I'm like, hey, do you recall, I remember there was one state that wouldn't let you truncate the W-2, the social security number on the W-2. Does anyone remember does anyone know if that state still has that requirement? And I couldn't find anything online, and sure enough, someone was able to find something for me and send it to me. So just in a matter of minutes through this email exchange, I was able to get some answers. And so, I think the WhatsApp group and the communities and the different conferences, all those opportunities, I can't stress enough the conferences and the ability to network during classes and courses, and just to expand, to try and embrace continued education so that you can meet and learn from others. I have met multiple mentors just in not being afraid to say hi or to ask a question or to get someone's contact information and then reach out a few months later or even a week later and say, hey, I have a question, or if you wouldn't mind spending a moment with me. People will almost certainly say yes. I know I personally never say no. It's a problem for me. But I have several mentees that I will work with because they've had the courage to reach out and ask questions. I'm happy to answer. And I know there's so many others out there who will as well. So I think networking is a huge part of being successful in payroll.
I completely agree. I almost don't know how you would do it without. networking and community, if I'm honest. Like after everything that
Exactly.
we've discussed today, especially in the US, but in payroll in general, I almost don't know how you would do it without it. But just one more thing before we move on to community. What, and you've spoken about tools and things as well. Was there anything, God forbid something like COVID happens again? Is there any measures that you've put in place at your current business, whether it be tools or systems or processes, procedures, in case something like that happens again? Anything to sort of protect you and your company and things like that?
No. No, I think we've done so many things over the last couple of years. I think
Hard to
payroll has
think back.
evolved so much over the last few years, just since COVID, really. There's been so much automation and embracing of technology. And so I think really to answer that question, the way that you prepare for any unknown or any situation, in my opinion, is embracing technology and
Yeah.
making sure that you're freeing up your team's time from the transactional work, using those automations and tools so that if and when a COVID strikes or something happens, you're able to use your internal resources to research, to stay on top of things, to build out what's needed, to execute what's needed.
Yeah.
Whereas, if you're not embracing that technology and you're not using automations or trying to figure out the easiest, most efficient way to handle our transactions, then you just have people doing transactions. And
Yeah.
you're having to tap into that external network and hope to God that someone's got an answer because you don't have the resources to look for it yourself. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
A loaded question potentially, because who knows what the next thing could be. But I
Yeah.
guess have your systems, have your entourage, as we spoke about earlier, and just have your house in order. I guess, like if everything is
Yeah.
as should be, and as you said about your data and things as well, if that is all clean, accurate as it should be, you can
Yeah.
help business leaders, as you mentioned earlier, as and when they need it. But
Absolutely.
moving on, and obviously this is how we know each other. So I think it's something important to talk about. And so before we jump into Q&A, I wanted to shift it a little bit. And we've mentioned it a bit during our conversation today. We met through Payroll Org, as we know. I've seen how strong the payroll community really is. But I just wanted to dive into that a little bit for somebody that might not have the connections, the community, the committee that you might have. And the importance of it, the effect it's had on your career, and what it could do for somebody that isn't playing a part in that.
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying before, I think anyone I talk to who's trying to, embrace their payroll career, or grow or learn, any manager who's trying to help focus their team or, figure out how to help them with their careers, my first recommendation to them always is to join Payroll Org or to find, to join Payroll Org or GPA or, one of the different communities that are out there. There's so many. But, for me, Payroll Org it's not a huge cost to be a member. You have all of these huge benefits where you're able to benefit from these free courses and free webinars. And I'll be honest, I think maybe 4 or 5 of my closest payroll friends, my closest, who I consider family, honestly, I'll reach out to them when something happens in my life. I go to them for questions. They've become huge parts of my life. I met them through the chat of a forum. My one friend, his name is Pablo. I met him through a chat during COVID when everything was virtual. We would be in this chat during a payroll course learning about FLSA or regular rate of pay or something ridiculously boring that we have to know in the US. And we started chatting in the forum and realizing that we had a connection. We both had a sense of humor. And so when the time came that we actually met in person at that conference, it was like we already knew each other. It was like we were family. And I've reached out to him several times for different questions. So, I think my biggest recommendation to people is, find a community and don't be afraid to just become a member, see what happens from it. Again, ask your employer to invest in your continued education. Payroll Org, I think it's like $360. So for annual membership, it's a couple $100 and you benefit
That's
great.
the thing as well, isn't it? It's generally company funded or business funded. I don't know if people think that they would be out of pocket themselves.
Yeah.
But that's something important to get across.
And if you're not sure how to go about it, so let's say it's something you want, but you're not sure how to even ask your leader, like a lot of these programs have templates that you can use that kind of help guide you
Yeah.
on how to ask for this support or this resources. I think Congress comes with like a, when you go to register for Congress, it comes with like a template that you can use to download to ask your
Oh
leaders
yeah.
to support you on that
How
trip.
how to
So
ask the boss, isn't it? I saw it the other day. I thought it was
yeah,
good.
it's fantastic. So yeah, if you're not sure how to approach it, find people like me who are vocal and come out here and speak about payroll and who say, ask us questions, reach out. We're not going to say no, and expand your network because yeah, don't be afraid. There's huge benefits that come from it, and there's really nothing like it in in any other industry. I really do believe. I think payroll
Yeah,
is super special.
I completely agree. Your contractors coming in to say hello again, or
Yes. There's a wood chipper going now.
nice. No, I'm not a US payroll expert, but I am still somehow lucky enough to be in this community, and I have to say, I've been completely blown away. Like we've been embracing ourselves within payroll org for I think like the last 4 or 5 years. And just like the connections that we built, how nice everyone is, like just welcomed us with open arms. It's just been amazing. I think there's so much power in sharing and collaborating together. While we're on this topic, is there anyone that you want to give a shout out who's been like a real mentor for you or like changed your career? Or you mentioned Paolo. Yeah, is there anyone else that you want to give a quick shout out to while we're on?
Yeah. Oh man, I've had so many different connections, but I think one of my favorite ones, and I've told this story actually on Nick's podcast. Can you hear me okay with the wood chipper outside?
Yeah.
Okay, good. On Nick's podcast, I'd mentioned this, but one of the people I'd met was Gregory Harmer from,
Oh yeah.
he used to oversee the Amazon payroll and is now over the CVS payroll, but
Mm-hmm.
wow, what a genius. I heard
Yeah.
him speak at a conference. He was talking about, ironically enough, what Amazon went through during COVID and their story. And I remember going back and telling my team, like, oh my gosh, you guys think you had it bad. Like, whoa, wait till you hear what Amazon had to
Yeah.
go through during COVID. And the following year, I was at the same conference and I was talking to people at my table and they'd asked if anyone had been here before. And I said, oh, I was here the year before. It was fantastic. Loved it. Great speakers. And oh my gosh, you should have heard this speaker from Amazon. He talked about his what they went through in payroll. And Tom, I kid you not, 3 minutes later, he sat down at our table. And I'm like, I was just talking about you. Like, oh my gosh, you're the guy from Amazon who was here last year. And he was nice enough to sit next to me and answer my questions. And I had asked him about his career.
Amazing.
And then when the time came a few months later, I'd gotten his contact information. And when the time came a few months later, I needed to make some changes on my team. I was trying to build out some new manager roles for my team and trying to figure out career paths for them. And so I remembered I had his email and I reached out to him and asked him a question. And he was kind enough to engage with me and answer my questions and truly helped me come up with this idea for what was next for my team. And he's been a mentor ever since. So yeah, I think that's who I would call out, a special call out to him. And all the Angela Wagners and the Anne Marie's, and there's so many out there who have been wonderful people that I've met through all these different connections.
Brilliant. That's amazing. And if people are interested on the Amazon growth / payroll story, Nick's done a podcast episode, I think, based on your introduction with Gregory. So that's available to listen to. Maybe I'll put it in the comments or something for this.
It's one of my favorite episodes.
It's really, really interesting. Listen, it really is.
And anyway, you'll see why I kept on asking him questions. He's a genius. He's a fascinating man. Like
a hub of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So we're coming up 15 minutes left, and we have had some questions in from our network. So we'll just dive into them if that's okay.
Let's do it.
So how, and I am going to read these off to make sure I get them right for the guys. So how soon should we register in a new state after hiring a remote worker there?
Oh, okay. So with the new state, and hiring a remote worker, this has happened a lot since COVID, actually. Payroll has gotten way more complicated in the US because of this. People move all over the place and we do hire remote often now. So with that, you want to do it ideally before they come on board. realistically, you're probably not going to know before they come on board. It's probably going to be something that's happening while they're onboarding. So registering as soon as possible in that state is probably the most compliant and the best that you could do. I think the specific timeline is going to vary depending on what state you're talking about and the specific state requirements. But generally, you should complete it within a few weeks of someone onboarding.
Okay, cool. If there is a real burning bridge to bring somebody on board, right? And you could use a PEO, is that correct?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's different ways to go about it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that. Is it okay to classify software engineers as exempt under FLSA?
I love FLSA questions. Even saying it 10 times fast, FLSA. Yes, it is generally acceptable to classify software engineers as under the FLSA, but it's dependent on, or really provided that they meet the right criteria. So with FLSA, all of it is about your criteria. There's going to be specific exemptions in computer related occupations. So to qualify for the exemption for a software engineer, I think it's it needs to involve system analysis, programming, software engineering, or other similar tasks, which would make sense for a software engineer, right? So that one's pretty easy. Yeah. They must be paid at least $684 a week or $27.63 per hour. So that's really specific.
To happen as well.
Yeah, really specific amounts, but the job title alone does not determine the exemption status. It's going to have, there's going to be different points that you have to clarify in order to see if they meet that exemption. And interestingly enough, one thing I thought was funny is that weekly amount, that $684 per week, would have maybe varied a few months ago. So again, the lovely joy of the US, the Department of Labor issued a ruling to increase salary requirements substantially. And that was in like April of 2024 is when it was finalized. And the expectation for employers was to implement and adhere to this new weekly salary requirement for people by July 1st. So it came out in April and you had to do this by July. So maybe you had people who were on the cusp, they were salaried exempt and they were making a certain dollar amount as their salary. And now because of this increased amount to what was going to be exempt, they were no longer going to be exempt. They would now have to be a non-exempt associate making hourly earnings and being eligible for overtime and all those. So employers had to scramble and figure out, well, do I convert this employee to a non-exempt now and continue paying them what they're being paid? Do I keep them as a salaried exempt employee? And do I pay them more? A lot of employers opted to pay them more and keep them at salaried. Well, funny enough, then I think it was November of that same year. So November of 2024, a judge vacated the rule and reverted it back to July 1st. So anyone that you had actually increased, so if you made the decision to increase the weekly salary for someone on July 1st, because you knew it was going to be increased on July, and then subsequently every 6 months after, now it wasn't. And so almost all employers just had to keep it the way it was. You had to pay, continue paying these people more. You're not going to take money away from someone that you just increased. So yeah, that was a fun retroactive experience here in the US. A good example.
Keeping it exciting for you.
Yes, they love it. Yeah.
So next question, what's the best way to manage different sick leave laws?
I would look for that magical payroll button that someone has hiding somewhere.
Oh yeah, that famous one.
That famous button would be extremely helpful. It's incredibly difficult. I'll be honest. As of 2025, I think there's 22 states in the US, including Washington, D.C., so a territory that's implemented their own paid sick leave. So the laws vary in terms of like what leave is provided and the eligibility criteria, the specific provisions. It's all different by state. So like just as an example, New Mexico has sick leave set at 64 hours per year. So in addition to whatever benefits you're offering, you need to offer 64 hours per year of paid sick leave to employees in New Mexico. New York, Missouri, Nebraska, Washington, D.C., and Alaska are 56 hours per year. So do you give the states with the most generous plan? Like, do you give them all the most generous plan and have one universal plan so that you're avoiding multiple different configurations? Do you maybe group states together like New York, Missouri, Nebraska, Washington, DC, Alaska, have one plan for those states and then add in new states as they come? Because inevitably you're going to have more states coming up with more plans on their own that you're required to abide by. So, you know, I think it definitely complicates things. I would say the best way to handle them and the best way to manage the different sick leave laws, in my humble opinion, is to come up with a universal policy. Unfortunately, it can sometimes be a little bit more expensive, but it is way easier to configure one policy that's more generous and will account for all of the other states that maybe require a few hours less.
Sure.
But you got to stay on top of it.
Do you think that that's done company by company, or is there like a general rule of thumb by industry or sector or something like that? Or
I think it's going to be by company, for sure. Industry definitely would have something to do with it. For example, like I am in restaurants. When I was in restaurants, if you had accrued time off, unless you were in a state that mandated us to pay it out, we were not paying it out, right? So like you would only pay out your accrued time that you've earned if we were required to. Whereas in a different industry, such as like vet health, we pay it out in any state. You've earned it, you deserve, it's yours. So I think it depends on the industry for sure. But yeah, I think each company can make their own decisions as to how they handle those plans and what they're doing to benefit their employees.
Brilliant, thank you. Can W-2 corrections be made electronically?
Man, that would stink if you couldn't. Yes. In fact, if you do 10 or more W-2Cs, which is what the W-2 corrections are, you're actually required to file them electronically. It can be a cumbersome process with amendments if those are necessary because of the W-2 corrections, but all of that can be done electronically. Absolutely.
Amazing, thank you. Nice simple one. Question 5. How do we handle an employee who works in 2 different states?
My favorite one. Yeah. First things first, you need to know and understand state tax laws. So some states have reciprocity agreements, as we talked about earlier, and that's going to simplify your tax withholding. It's going to allow employees to pay taxes in their state of residence as opposed to where they're working. So it's important employers are aware of the income tax withholding requirements for both states. Familiarizing yourself with employment laws on both states, so including minimum wage, overtime, leave policies, always applying the stricter standard if there are conflicts between the 2 states. Yeah. It's complicated. You know, I said earlier, you know, we have 1,000 locations that border on different states. And, you know, we have people who work across different states all the time. And so you do have to stay on top of which states have those reciprocal agreements. Is someone set up with the right resident or work tax? And it's definitely a full-time job, if not more than a full-time job. So yeah, I have some resources on there managing the different states, and understanding the state laws is probably the most important.
I think a great bit of advice to take away from that is just apply whatever is stricter. Just go by that.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's also the easiest way to handle it. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Talk a little bit, if it's okay, just before we wrap up, on like the future of payroll and how we think that's going to look, right? Because beforehand, you know, we spoke about COVID, but that was never in the books. You know, working from home probably wasn't to the level that we are now, and we now are. So, you know, what does the future of payroll look like from a tech standpoint? How do you see tech, the future, AI, all of those buzzwords that we hear all the time? How do you see that shaping the future of payroll in the US?
You know, we hear it so much, it's almost, you know, sickening to hear again, but it's true. So payroll is in the spotlight right now, and we have this opportunity. We have always been transactional, always. And as the years have evolved and technologies improved, we've been able to embrace it and use it and figure out ways, again, like I said earlier, to automate different functions and transactional items that you can automate. You can make life easier and make more efficient. And it allows this opportunity for payroll to then understand their data, to be able to provide data that's then going to enrich other business leaders and allow them to make better business decisions because of the data that you can now provide. So I think payroll's in the spotlight. It's an exciting future for us because We're no longer just transactional function that's sitting in the back. And, we used to call it the redheaded stepsister or stepchild or, whatever
Yeah.
that phrase is. We're not that anymore. I don't know that we have seats at the table or the chief officer roles yet, the chief payroll officer roles yet, but I do know that any smart company is tapping into the resource of their payroll leaders and bringing them in early when there are initiatives or changes. As I talked about earlier, any initiative you want, need to execute it, it needs to hit the paycheck at some point. So
100%.
I think we have this opportunity to be strategic, to advise, to consult, to provide this incredibly important sets of data that we understand and have. So I think the future of payroll is extremely exciting. I personally have enjoyed the last few years just even watching my teams. I was just talking about this. We had an emerging technologies committee, and I was just talking about this the other day. So one of my team members has joined that committee. She's starting
internally.
Yeah, this is the payroll org. So it's a payroll org committee.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the Emerging Technologies Committee. And so we meet monthly and we talk about different emerging tech. And so she recently joined this group because she's been getting more involved in payroll org. She's studying for her CPP right now, and she's really excited about her payroll future. And so she joined this group, and we were trying to come up with topics for future meetings. And I said, her name is Adriana. I said, Adriana, you should present to the committee some of the things you've done for us with automations. Just watching Adriana and watching what she's learned over the last couple of years and how to apply these tools and skill sets, I'm in awe. She's exceeded my skills and then some.
Amazing.
Like, I sit there and watch her do all these, files where every pay period we used to have to take multiple sets of files and copy and paste them into a spreadsheet and, do all these different formulas, and you had to reformat everything. And it took forever. Every pay period, you were doing the same things. She's gone and looked at everything that we do repetitive, everything that's happening over and over again, and figure out ways to automate, to make it so that you're using macros and data source queries, and you're making it so that the team can press refresh on an Excel workbook, and all of those files are reformatted automatically, and all the formulas are already there and refreshed with your data. So just watching the evolution of payroll professionals and how they've taken this technology and been able to figure out how to use it in their day-to-day, to me, is fascinating and exciting. And it just shows, we have other functions that actually come to us, that come to Adriana and say, hey, how did you do this? Or can you show us how you did this?
Wow.
And so it really does put payroll in this opportunity, the spotlight that you have to be helpful, strategic, to not just be transactional, but to truly impact the employee experience. So yeah, I think it's an important time for payroll.
Fantastic. I love that story. And that leads me on to my next question, something that interests me personally because of the work that we do. We place payroll professionals, HR tech professionals. But one thing that interests me is what you think are the 3 to 5 main skills, maybe something that you've seen develop in Adriana that payroll professionals are going to need in the future.
I think understanding the data is huge. Understanding your systems and how they're built and how they're configured. So many of us are using these big systems, the Workdays and the Oracles and the UKGs, and just these really large systems that are intense and customizable, and are, you can do so much with these systems. And so understanding them, I think, is a really important tool. I know that when I'm looking for team members or to staff, I'm looking for someone who understands systems and who understands technology and who can analyze data. I don't really hire someone who doesn't have good Excel skills, honestly. While I wish everything wasn't done in Excel still, and we're starting to advance into Power BI dashboards and all these different tools that are available, and Alteryx and all these different things. It's important that you're technology driven and that you're embracing technology. And so looking for that skill set is huge these days. Yeah, you need it. You need to understand formulas and if and then statements, and you need to understand your data. So I think that's the biggest.
I completely agree with you, Sarah. I think it's like that's what our clients are asking us to find is they
Yeah.
want tech savvy people, not necessarily people that have been there and done it and know everything, because a lot of what we're dealing with right now is brand new, but an
Yeah.
open-mindedness to learn that stuff or at least get involved. And my advice to the payroll professional that might be listening to this is if you're not using AI or something like that, you don't think that you're using AI. One, you probably are at
Yeah.
some point within your payroll journey. But two, just get yourself involved, do something, have a look online, do a course, speak to payroll org, speak to Sarah, because you might think that you're already behind, but you're not. A lot of people haven't even touched the surface with this stuff yet. And I think, just throw yourself into it, try and get some kind of experience with AI and technology, because as we said, you hear it from Sarah, the payroll director, if you want to get hired, you need to have those kind of skills.
And I'll add in, we're not using any generative AI at Banfield currently, but I have focus time on my calendar right now. And I remember hearing this on a podcast a few weeks ago, like the Outlook feature with focus time, where your Outlook is going to determine when you have the best time to focus or you have available time. That's all AI technically. So yeah, I think you are using these tools. You just don't realize it or know it. And finding ways to use them more and understand them is going to be crucial to your success.
Excellent. Thank you. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing all of your experience and knowledge with us today. As we've heard, the US payroll system is as vast as the country itself. And it's clear that to be successful, you need precision, flexibility, and your partnerships. The partnerships with, as we said, your vendors, your teams, everybody. For those of you taking on US payroll, this should have hopefully given you some insight into how to support your US operations effectively. Of course, we have Payroll Congress coming up, which I'm excited for. I need to get myself a tan, so I'll be heading over to Orlando again. So we're excited for that. Where look, it's probably a bit late for people to come now, right? But get yourself involved next year, where you can network with other people, learn new trends, hear from the expert. Nick is speaking. Are you speaking this year, Sarah?
I'm in 3 sessions. Yes, I have one on best practices with system implementations with my friend Ryan Yanetta, who has more acronyms at the end or more letters at the end of his name than the alphabet, it feels like. I was invited to do a panel on RPA and AI with some folks from Robert Half and Mary Holland, which is exciting.
Fantastic.
And then on Friday, I'm doing a session on supplemental taxation. So yay for US taxes.
Amazing. Fantastic. Nick will be speaking there as well. I can't remember what the names of his sessions are. Sorry, Nick. Can't give you a plug there.
Probably leadership or AI is my guess.
Probably something along those lines. But thank you to everybody for joining us and being part of Global Pay Fest in our US session. I hope you've gained some insights. All of our sessions will be available on demand after today, so you don't have to have 15 copies and stay up. Next, we're heading north to Canada, where we'll explore another highly regulated but unique structured payroll system. Sarah, thank you again. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts?
Well, one, I'm looking forward to Canada. I heard it was Dana doing Canada, and she's quite the expert. I'm excited for that. So yay. Yeah. No, thank you for having me on, and thank you guys for putting this on. I think it's the global payroll world is an exciting world, and it's super cool to be able to learn about all the other countries and all the complexities that each country has. So thank you for putting this on. And if you are out there and you're a payroll professional and you're curious about the United States payroll, or you want to network and don't really know where to start, please reach out. We're all happy to help in the payroll world.
Amazing. Thank you again, Sarah. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Bye.